Prabhupada Jaya All right, is that better? Okay, much better. I can hear myself now. As long as it stays in. Right. Okay, journey of self-discovery. This is all. Okay, all right. Apologies for technological problems here. But God's laws don't work like this, right? We learned last week. The laws of God are perfect all the time. We never find that our planet is okay, no volume. Hare Krishna, is that all right? Okay, so is that okay? All right. So we heard last week how God's laws are perfect. We never find planets bumping into each other, going off their orbits, or, some nature suddenly, like the gravity law doesn't work and we all start flying or something like that. But man-made technology and these laws don't work sometimes. So today is our third session. Welcome to some of you who made it only today. We'll do a quick recap, really quick. Of course, these are the sessions we'll be covering. You will notice, interestingly, that question just, what happened? Just 1 second. Not sure why it didn't appear. Are you controlling me? Okay. So we did search for happiness. Does God exist? Today we're going to do Who Am I? And this session, it wasn't there on the 5-part session, but I'm deciding to add on this if everyone is okay that we add one additional week, because I think it's going to be very, very meaningful for all of you. Who is God? Because we discussed, does God exist? But we didn't discuss who is God. And why is there one God or many gods? And if there's many gods, what's the relationship between all of them? And then we're going to do the session that you all are eagerly waiting for, why bad things happen to good people, and then practical spirituality. So just really quick recap. So we discussed in the first session the importance of human life, how human being and animal, they have some common things like eating, mating, sleeping, defending, and they also have some difference. So what is that difference? Is that human beings have higher intelligence. So animals also think, but their thinking is limited to eating, mating, sleeping, and defending. They don't think beyond that. So if we have higher intelligence, that means we have to use this higher intelligence for a different purpose than what the animals are using it for. And our intelligence is meant to use it for inquiry. This is like fluctuating. Anyway, it's meant to inquire into the absolute truth. No, it's not the movement. It's just, I think, unless I speak into it, it's not steady. If I move a little bit, it's not like this mic. Okay. And inquiry into the root cause of suffering and the destination of life. And then we discussed also that usually when we're seeking for happiness, something that really prevents us from experiencing happiness is the problems. And then we define what are real problems in that context, that they must satisfy 3 criteria, must be common to all, no one must want it, and no one can avoid it. And we discussed what are these real problems of life: birth, old age, disease, and death, and also miseries caused by one's own body and mind, other living entities, and natural disturbances. So all these things are something that we cannot avoid, they're common to all, and nobody wants it. And we discussed possible solutions, that material advancement is not really a solution. It may provide some temporary relief, but not a permanent solution. and also that modern technological advancement or these material solution, oftentimes they give rise to other problems. So then we talked about how to permanently solve any problem. We need to address the root cause. We don't address it on the surface. And that connected us to the next topic, does God exist? And we discussed a number of things that, okay, this place is a place of problems, this material world. So is there something wrong with the Creator? You know, who's behind all this? Does God really exist? And if He exists, what are His qualities? So we discussed how creation implies a creator, laws imply a lawmaker, nothing orderly happens by chance. We discussed the definition of God, that He is the supreme source of everything, the supreme controller, the supreme proprietor, the supreme enjoyer. And then we discussed, okay, now that we proved the existence of God, how do we know Him? And in this contest, we discussed how do we know anything for that matter. There's 3 ways of knowing anything. That is by direct sense perception. But then, what did we say about that? Is that a good method? No. Senses are imperfect, so it's not a good method in the sense that, yes, it gives valuable information, but it's not complete or it's not perfect. There can be defects. And then there is the anuman or the inductive. What was this method? Theoretical knowledge? Okay. So basically you see 2 things or hear 2 things and then you put 2 and 2 together and come to some conclusion. So it's like a hypothesis, basically. And then there is the Shabda Praman. What is Shabda Praman? By listening. And is it a good method? Is that a good method? Yes. Is it authoritative? Yes. Why it's authoritative? Yeah. It's from authority. It's coming from someone who is beyond these 4 defects, right? Coming from God. So, and what is that body of knowledge or authority? It's the Vedas. So they describe the absolute truth and they stand the test of time. And we also discussed that there are different scriptures and that the essence is the same, but there may be difference in the details, but the essence are really the same. And that the summary of Vedas or the scriptures for this age is Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. So those of you who haven't heard the second session, I would really encourage you to go back and hear it. Even though today's session will not so much connect to it will not build on that, but the one God or many gods, we're going to use a number of points from there. So it'll be very useful to attend, hear the recording if you haven't attended already. So today's session is Who Am I? So, people in this world, sometimes they face a problem called identity crisis. Many times, or sometimes, people are trying to understand, who am I actually? What's my purpose? How many of you have ever asked yourself that question? Good. Yeah, we all go through these, phases where we're really questioning, okay, who am I? What am I doing here? What's going on? Let me figure out who I am really. So if you were to ask this question to somebody out there, or let's say even all of you, what might an answer be that we get from people? If you just ask out there, what are some answers people may give? Raise your hands and answer. If I ask someone, who am I? Or who are you? Who are you? What will people say usually? Name, okay, their name, their profession, okay, I'm a doctor, I'm an engineer, okay, what else? I'm Indian, I'm American, I'm Russian, right? Okay. What else may people say? Relationship with someone, like mother, father, I'm a student, or I'm a child, or something like that. I'm a baby. Yeah, what else we might say? Anything else? Some Indians may say, I'm a Brahmin, I'm a Kshatriya, I'm a Vaishya, right? Some caste, right? Or you may say, I am a Malayali, I am a, English speaking, I am Hindi speaking, something like that. So, normally these are the answers. I'm a man, I'm a woman, I'm a businessman, I'm a designer, I'm a sportsman, I'm a musician, I'm a husband or wife, I'm a father or son, I am an American, I'm Japanese, I'm Mexican, I'm Christian, I'm Muslim, I'm Hindu, right? So these are some things that people may say. And we can broadly categorize them into what? Maybe nationality, relationship, profession, names, like that, right? Broadly, or caste or something. So now I want to ask you a question. Can name be changed? Yes, can be changed, right? You can see here, US name change by state. Can sex be changed? Yes. Nowadays, anything is possible. You can change your sex. They have these surgeries by which they can change their sex. Can one's nationality be changed? Yes. Here's a lady with her immigration, her naturalization certificate. Can caste be changed? Yes, sometimes we get married to a different person and we take on their caste or something. Can relationships be changed? Yes. So everything can be changed. So whoever we are thinking we are, all those things can be changed. So then who are we? Are we the persons that we are thinking we are? Or who are we? And suppose I change my name. Tomorrow I become Mary Lou. Am I going to change? The person within me changes? No. Or tomorrow I change my profession from being a doctor to a nurse practitioner. Oh, that's close. That's too close. Maybe I become a real estate agent. Am I going to change? The person within me is going to change? No. But yet, something is changing. And we are thinking we are that person. I'm a real estate agent now. I'm not a doctor anymore. So what is changing, actually? The personality hasn't changed. So that means already we are understanding that we're not acting according to our true identity. In this world, when somebody, acts like someone else, but they're not that, what do we call them? Hypocrite, okay. What else might we call them? Pretender, all right. Double-faced. Would we, in simple terms, call them crazy sometimes? Liar, okay. There was one time, Jawaharlal Nehru, everybody knows Jawaharlal Nehru? He went to a prison one time. And when he went into the prison, not prison actually, a mental hospital. Yeah, mental hospital. And one of the patients came running to Jawaharlal Nehru. And he said, who are you? Who are you? And Jawaharlal Nehru said, I'm the Prime Minister of India. And the patient said, well, you know what? When I first came into the hospital, I also said that I was the Prime Minister of India. Welcome. So we do say that when somebody is impersonating someone else, we call them crazy. So now we are all thinking that we are all these identities. So should we be called crazy at some level? What do you think? Yes? No? No? At some level? So, so all these things that we refer to as our identities, and there's a big bag of identities that we carry, right? We have many, many different identities. You know, we also, apart from these, there's subtler identities too. I am good, I am bad. I'm worthy, I'm unworthy. I'm beautiful, I'm ugly. I'm rich, I'm poor, right? And then there's even subtler identities in that. I'm a respectable person. I'm just useless. You know, I'm a victim. I'm a perpetrator. I'm the abused. You know, I'm the abuser. You know, things like that. So there's many identities we have. I mean, this bag shows just a few. We have so many identities that we assume, but yet, and we keep switching between these identities. But the sense of who we are, does that change? It doesn't change. So who are we? Who are we then? Who is the real us? What is that sense of self that we feel always? No matter what these different identities are, what is that sense of self we feel? Who are we then? The answer is obvious. Who can tell me? Who are we? What's our true identity? Yeah, what is inside is who? We are the souls. Yes. And Bhagavad Gita very emphatically tells us that we are not the temporary body, but we are the spirit soul. Our identity is the soul. The body is just temporary. Later we're going to discuss the different types of bodies we have too. You know? So all these identities, what are these based on? They're based on the body. The body, isn't it? All the grosser identifications, they're based on what we are doing with the body, or what body we came into this life with, right? I'm a fair person, I'm a dark person, right? So these are all identification based on the body. And in fact, our identification with the body is very, very deep. Suppose you go to someone's house. What do we usually ask? We say, how's everybody at home? Everybody. Everybody. We never say, how is every soul at home? Isn't it? Do we say? No. It's so ingrained within us that we are the bodies. How is everybody at home? Right? So, very deep. And yet, we're learning that all these identifications or designations that are based on the body, they're temporary and they can be changed, and that's not the real us. Right? So male, female, young, old, birthland, all these. So all those can change. So who am I again? Now I'll ask you another question. Suppose your friend is driving and he has a bad accident. Whom are you going to take to the hospital first? Huh? The body, the friend, right? So you're going to take the friend. What if the car was, you know, a Rolls Royce or Tesla or something which costs lots and lots of dollars, thousands. You know, how much does a Tesla cost? 80,000, something like that. Or a Rolls Royce, I don't even know how much it costs. So what if such a car is involved in an accident? Who would you take to the hospital? The friend. Yeah, it's very clear. You're all looking at me like, am I even asking this question? You know, it's like a no-brainer. So the price of the car is 30,000, you know. And when a car gets totaled, of course, you know, the value of the car is nothing. But what is the value of the body? So let's look at it. Actually, one scientist in the early 20th century, he analyzed the constituents of the human body. So here's the constituents. So the body has enough iron to make 6 small nails, carbon to make 900 pencils, sugar to sweeten 10 cups of coffee, potassium to fire a toy cannon, lime and fat to make 7-bar soaps, phosphorus to make 20 matchboxes, water to fill a 10-gallon tank, a little sulfur, calcium, and other 3 elements. And if you were to buy all these in the market, the value of the body is just about $20. And all our life, we're thinking that we are the body. But actually, the value of human life is priceless, as all of you very readily pointed to the answer. Of course, we're going to take our friend to the hospital. It's priceless. And again, what is it that it makes it so priceless? It's the presence of the soul. So, now just as last week we went through the proof of existence of God, we're going to go through proof of existence of soul. Already we've discussed a little bit, but we're going to discuss some further proof of the existence of the soul. So the first thing is common sense. If we just even apply a little bit of common sense, we can already understand that we are the souls. So in this picture, what's happening? Somebody left their body, and everyone is lamenting and crying. So how many of you know somebody who may have died? Everyone knows, right? Somebody who has died. When someone dies, let's just take the example, maybe, a wife, a lady loses her husband. And when the lady loses her husband, she's in a lot of grief. And she's lamenting, and she's saying that he's gone. In every language, we say the same thing, no matter what language you speak. In English, we say he passed away, or he left his body. In every language, we say that. So till yesterday, when the person was alive, her husband was alive, she, oftentimes, she may want to stay alone with her husband. She may drive away people from the room too, because she just wants to talk with her husband some private things, or she wants to have some private moments or something. But now, when her husband leaves his body, she doesn't want to be left alone in the room anymore. She wants someone else to be there. And she says, if somebody asks her, your husband is still here. The body is still there. And she says, no, his body is there, but he's gone. So who's gone? It's again, the soul is gone, right? The body is there, but we all live our life thinking that we are the bodies. But as soon as the soul leaves the body, everything changes, even for the person, the most intimate person. There is a nice verse quoted by Shankaracharya in this regard. He says, Yavat pavano nivasati dehe, thavat prichati kushalam gehe. Gatavati vayo deha paye, bharya bhibyati tasmin kaye. So as long as there is breath, pavana means breath. As long as there's breath in the body, so long people in the household will ask about one's welfare, kushalam or kaushalam. That, how are you doing? Are you okay? But once the breath leaves, when the soul leaves, the breath leaves, even the own wife dreads the very same body, isn't it? I remember working in the hospital. She's also works in the hospital. She's a nurse. And, I've taken care of patients and for many days, and these are children that I used to take care of. And after the child leaves, I have seen cancer patients die and other patients die. And, the moment the patient dies, it's like you're scared to enter the room. You just feel very differently about the whole thing. Why is it? It's the same body. What is it that makes it so scary? Why? Because the soul has left the body, that's it. And that body immediately starts decomposing. Until then, the soul has been keeping the body very fresh and can move and supple, and very quickly then it starts decomposing, and there's rigor mortis, the body, you can't move it also as you want, right? The color starts changing, everything starts changing. All this is because of the presence of the soul. So, I should have put this slide before I said it. What is that whose presence makes the body lovable and whose absence makes the body abominable? It is the soul. So in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna speaks about this right in the 2nd chapter. He says, as the embodied soul continuously passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. A sober person is not bewildered by such a change. So you can see here that we're always passing actually from one body to another body. So we had these baby bodies, and we had like child bodies. The child grows, then youth body and manly body, and then there's old, and then it goes on. So we don't lament when we are changing bodies within this life, usually. But when the soul moves on to another body, then at that time, we seem to lament. But this verse is saying that a sober person is basically one who has knowledge. He doesn't lament because he understands that the soul is simply moving on to another body or destination, right? So again, even when the body moves, even when the soul moves on to another body altogether, the person himself remains the same. And we're going to see later some examples of this. So, and the body is something that goes through transformation, right? And it describes that the body or anything that is material always goes through 6 changes. It takes birth, it grows for some time, and then it stays, it produces some offsprings, and then it dwindles, and finally it dies. So no matter which kind of body it is, it always goes through these 6 changes. Even you take the example of a house, right? If you don't maintain a house, sometimes have you been to some foreclosure homes? When you're trying to buy a house, you go see a foreclosure home, and it has not been taken care of by a person, like a living person there, and everything is like such a mess there actually. Everything starts decomposing. So it is the presence of the soul or spirit, the living person, that actually keeps the matter in a certain way, even up to a certain point. But despite the soul being there, the nature of matter is that it is always temporary. It always degrades. And finally, it just completely dies. So even homes, there are 60, 70, 80-year-old homes. At one point, you just have to demolish, the whole thing and build a new home, right? So that was the first way we can understand that the presence of a soul, just common sense. Now the second is intuition. Can I maybe ask somebody to give me a watch? Yeah? I won't take it, I promise. I will return it back to you. So, is this your watch? Yes. And how do you say when you say? You say, this is my watch. Are you the watch? No, you're not the watch. It's your watch. It belongs to you. So it's very clear in this example that you're not the watch. You're separate from the watch. Thank you. So, now using that same principle, okay? Are you your hand? How do you refer to it? You put your watch on what? I put my watch on my hand, right? So when we say my hand, using that same principle, are we the hand or are we separate from the hand? Yeah, the moment we say it's my hand, because if we are the hand, we'll say I hand. I hand aching or something like that. I'm not sure how you would exactly say it, I hand. But, so we say my hand, my leg, my body. Do we say my body? My body is hurting everywhere. We say that sometimes. My body just feels so worn out and exhausted, right? So it's very clear, even using a little intuition, that we're not the body. So we say my nose, my ears, my hand, my shirt. So again, who am I? So just as you say it is your watch, so that means you are the owner of the watch, right? So if we say it's my hand, my ears, my legs, what are we? The owners of these, we are the owner of our body. We are the owners of our ears and legs and so on, right? So very clearly you can see the difference there. We use this language, but yet we never really think a little deeply about it. So just using intuition, we can see that we are the soul. Now you may ask, how to see the soul? How can we, so we saw a little bit that how we can understand that we are separate from the body. But what are some symptoms of the presence of the soul? Because you can understand the soul just as, you may not see the poison, but if you give somebody the poison, they'll be dead. So you can understand that there was poison in this cup of tea or whatever by its symptoms, right? Now suppose, it's early morning and the mother goes and wakes up the child or something in the house. Can you see the sun in the house? Mother says it's morning and the child wakes up. How do you tell the child that the sun is up? How does the child know that the sun is up? Because there's light already. All the blinds are closed here, you can see, but you can see that it's daylight. So you can perceive the presence of the sun by presence of light. Simple example. Like sometimes I remember my sister has 2 little boys, and sometimes when you have to catch a flight or something, she wakes them up. She says, it's morning, wake up, we have to go catch a flight. And the kids, the elder one especially, this 5-year-old, used to say, it's not morning, mommy, it's still night. Why are you saying it's morning? Because he associates morning to be light. And this is like still dark. So presence of light. So similarly, consciousness is actually, so the presence of soul is perceived by the presence of consciousness. And this consciousness is spread throughout the body. Just like if I pinch you, immediately you become aware. Any part. There's a little eyelash somewhere, and you can feel it right away. You put that same eyelash on a dead body, he doesn't feel it. So it's perceived as consciousness. So consciousness is the symptom of the soul. And what are some other symptoms of the presence of consciousness? How do we perceive? So it's by thinking, feeling, and willing. As long as there's consciousness within anyone, they can think, they can feel, they can will. I know all of you are thinking right now. Definitely. Everyone is thinking right now. But I don't know what you're thinking. But I know you're thinking for sure. That wouldn't be a faulty thing to say. You all are definitely thinking. And I'm sure you're also feeling something. Perhaps, one person is very eager. Okay, what's coming next? And someone else is like, all right, we know it's the soul. Why is she boring us so much, or something like that. Or maybe like, is it going to end on time and I have to go home and, you're feeling some things. Okay, I left my children at home and I wonder how they're doing. Or, we have some feelings. And then there is the willing, right? Maybe some of you are thinking, these sessions are really convincing every time, and maybe I'll really change into a devotee or something. I'm not sure if I want to change. Maybe I shouldn't come for the next session or something like that. Or, we're making some decisions. all the time. So this is the presence, this is the symptom of the presence of the soul. There's also different states or levels of consciousness by which we can understand that there is a soul in the body. So there is the waking stage that is described, which is called Jagruti. And this is the stage where we're completely awake, the body, mind, soul, everything is active, right? Then there is the sleeping stage. So when you're sleeping, this is called Swapna. You still have dreams when you're sleeping, and we know that there is, those of you who know a little bit about medical science, you know that there is REM sleep and the NREM sleep. So REM sleep, you're still awake, kind of, meaning although your body is asleep, your mind is still awake. So the mind and soul is still active, right? So this is another way you can understand there is consciousness. Or sometimes people go into coma, and this is called Shushupti. Here only the soul is active within the body. So in the hospitals, even though somebody is in coma, they're still maintaining the body with artificial support, life support systems. They're not, plugging. But sometimes when the coma is there for a long time, and they see that all the organs are failing, they may choose to withdraw that life support. Recently I had read one story of one woman who was in coma for a long time, and the family members were having this discussion. So the doctor comes finally and he says that we don't think he's going to survive or she's going to survive. And so the family is then trying to make a decision to pull the plug. And amazingly, when they decide to pull the plug, the lady just like awakens and she says, I've been hearing the conversations, So she's there in the body. The soul is active. Because all along, all these relatives of hers were telling her, you got to fight, you got to fight. And she was saying, I've been hearing your conversations and I'm really trying to fight. And here I am, I'm fighting. I want to be alive, So, and then finally there's death when the soul leaves the body, and that is when we see that the consciousness is also gone. So, wherever one sees the presence of consciousness, one must actually understand that there is the presence of the soul. There was one driver driving a taxi, and the passenger, just gently taps on the shoulder of the taxi driver, and he says, can you pull over to the side? I want to go this way. I just need to stop for a bit. And the driver just gets so startled, and he bangs the car into a tree. And then the passenger, he says, what happened? I just patted you very gently, and I just asked you to make this turn and pull over on the right side. And then the taxi driver says, well, this is the first day I'm driving a taxi. Till yesterday I was driving a funeral van. So he's not used to somebody getting up and tapping on his shoulder, the symptom of consciousness. So as long as the consciousness is there, as long as the soul is there, there's consciousness, and you expect certain things to happen. This person was not used to that, so he just becomes startled all of a sudden. So, each of you, you can all think, and you can feel, and you can will, and that is because you all have a soul. And the body really appears to be alive, and that is just because of the presence of the soul. And as long as there is the soul, will always react to everything. There is cold, there is hot, to everything we perceive because of the presence of the soul. And in fact, even you see this in other living entities, not only human beings, but every living entity, even plants, you can perceive the presence of the soul. That when sun comes, there are plants, they turn to that side, right? Anybody who's grown tulsi at home in this country, they're always, whichever direction the sun comes, she tends to grow in that direction. So this is the presence, you can perceive the presence of the soul. All right. So now, There is this is which car is this? Anybody can recognize? It's a Rolls Royce, yes. So there is a Rolls Royce, and it's fully loaded, and it has gas and everything. But can it just go by itself? No, it cannot go by itself. Even if it is a remote or whatever it is, it needs the presence of a driver. And so very much our body is like the car, and the driver is the soul. If the driver is not present, the body cannot do anything. And our body very much is like a complicated engine that is working, you know. We saw that last week. So for the soul, this is a verse from Bhagavad Gita. It's saying here, for the soul, there's neither birth nor death at any time. It's simply changing bodies. And he has not come into being. That means that his existence is what? Eternal. It's not that he comes into existence at some point, right? He's always there, but it's only the body that is coming into being at some point. And he does not come into being, and he will not come into being, meaning that he's always constant. This is one of the characteristics of the soul. And further, he is unborn, eternal, ever existing, and primeval. He is not slain when the body is slain. Okay? And this is another verse which is describing Vasam Sijirna Niyatha Vihaya. So this is describing that just as a person puts on new garments, giving up the old ones, the soul similarly accepts new material bodies, giving up the old and useless ones. So when does the soul move on to another body? It's when, you know, this body is no longer functional in one way or the other. Right? So then the soul usually moves on to the other body. That's at least in all of the natural deaths. Right? And we'll talk about the unnatural in our session on why do bad things happen to good people. Okay. Here is a quote from Thomas Huxley. There is a third thing in the universe, to wit, consciousness, which I cannot see to be matter or force. So far we discussed common sense and intuition. And we discussed another thing. What is that? Symptom of the soul is perceived by consciousness. Now here is a fourth method. This is a more scientific method to understand the presence of the soul. This is near-death experiences or out-of-body experiences. So there is this Dr. Michael Sabon. He studied in the Emory University, and he's a cardiologist. And he did a lot of study on near-death experiences. So through that, he understood the presence of the soul. So usually, the scenario is that the patient is clinically dead, you know, their EEG and EKG is kind of flat, or they're having a surgery and they're under anesthesia, but the person actually gets out of the body, the real person gets out of the body, and they view what is happening from above. So actually what prompted him into this study is that one time they brought a lady into the hospital by ambulance, and she was unconscious at that time. And they took her into the OR and did the whole surgery, and then, you know, the surgery was successful. Then she was, you know, wheeled into the room, recovery room, and then she became awake, you know, after the anesthesia wore off. And Dr. Sabon goes and asks her, okay, how are you doing? And she says, I'm all right. And then she says, you know, an hour and a half ago, I went and saw this oak tree in front of the hospital. And, you know, he's thinking, well, hour and a half ago, you were in the OR. Now, how can you go and see the oak tree? But, you know, he didn't take it lightly. And then he started asking her some further questions, you know, to see, is she really speaking the truth? So then he asks her, okay, where did you see it from? She said, well, I went to the terrace and saw. Okay, what was on the terrace? Can you describe? Okay, well, when you go on the terrace, on the left side, you will see some really worn out Nike shoes. And on the right side, there's a water tank. And in the front, you will see an oak tree in the front of the hospital. And then Dr. Sabon asks, because usually in the hospitals, they keep terrace doors closed because there are many depressed patients, just in case they might decide to just go up the terrace and jump down the hospital. So he asked the authorities, okay, was the terrace door open? And they say that no, it was closed. It's not been open in the last like 6 months actually. And so then he decides to go up and check it out, if what this lady is saying is true or not. So he goes up and he finds the worn out Nike shoes and the water tank and the oak tree in the front. And he's like, wow, and that is what prompted him to, conduct this whole study. He actually studies many patients. And many patients report these kind of things. I also know of one sannyasi within ISKCON, he had a surgery, an abdominal surgery, and he had an out-of-body experience also. And, when he was awake after he came out and the doctor came to see him, he said, well, you know what? You were talking about golf. And I don't think it's a very good idea to talk about golf when you're operating. You may remove the wrong organ or something, or you may cut something wrong. And the doctor was like, how do you know? I heard it. I heard everything. So sometimes doctors really talk all kinds of stuff. They talk about cricket, they talk about their wives, they talk about their affairs, and all kinds of stuff. So be aware, those of you who are in the medical profession, what you're talking, because the patients can hear sometimes. So anyway, so the typical thing is that the EEG or EKG is flat, and the patient goes out of the body, and he can see things. And he studied more than like 200 cases of these out-of-body or near-death experiences. Now, that's one method. Then another method by which we can understand, scientific method by which we can understand the presence of the soul, is past life memories. This is Ian Stevenson. He's a professor of psychiatry at the University of Virginia, and he has investigated over 2,000 cases of these past life memories. And also in India, there's another doctor named Satwan Pasricha who works for NIMHANS, and she's also very popular actually in this. And they both of them also work together in this field. So past life memories is basically, you must have heard that people remember their past life sometimes. So actually one time there was one devotee giving a class, a similar class about a soul and life after that. Is that a fact or fiction? He was giving a class and he was quoting this very thing, past life memories. And this person, he was younger that time, but this person, he's a professor in Ruparel College in Mumbai. And he said, well, I am one of the cases that Dr. Pasricha studied, and my case is there in the book. And this devotee didn't know, he looked around to see if there are girls whom he's trying to impress or something. But there were no girls that he was trying to impress. And then he asked, is this really true? Can you tell me your story? And he told his whole story. So basically, when he was about 3 years old, he started telling his parents, he was born in Mumbai, and he used to live in Borivali. And he started telling his parents that, take me to Udaipur. I used to live there. I used to live there. Take me to Udaipur. And his parents just thought, he's just being a child. He's just faking something, whatever. And they tried to call some babas and tried to do some pujas and something. do different kinds of worship, but this was not going away. And he kept saying, I'm a security guard in Udaipur. And finally, then they actually contact this Dr. Pasricha and Dr. Stevenson. And they come and they decide to take him to Udaipur, but they don't tell the child anything. And this child has never been out of Mumbai. Okay, it's the first time he's leaving Mumbai and he's on the train. And they don't tell him where they're taking him. But just one station before Udaipur, he starts saying, well, next station is Udaipur. It's coming soon. And they were really like, wow, And then Udaipur comes and he says, okay, let's get down. This is our place. This is my place. Let's get down. And then he gets down and he actually leads them. They're just in the back because they've never been to Udaipur. They don't know what is what. He leads them. He's a 3.5-year-old little boy. He crosses the bridge. He goes to the other side. He calls a rickshawala. He knows him by name. He says, Are Ramu, how are you doing? Everything is good. Your family is good. And he's like, who's this kid? I've never seen him before. And then he starts directing this rickshawala. Go take this turn and take that turn and take that turn. And he goes to his house. And as soon as he goes to his house, he just goes running and embraces his 32-year-old son in the past life, He was actually murdered in this previous life. And so he goes and hugs this 32, and obviously this man is also thinking, who is this boy? Is this really true? So then he wants to test, really, to see if he was his father in his previous life. And he says that if you can find, the place where my father used to hide his rifle, I will believe that what you're saying is true. And so effortlessly, he just goes up the steps, he goes, finds a cupboard, he says, give me the keys. He opens the cupboard, and then there is a safe inside that cupboard. He opens that, and then there's a picture, and behind the picture is the rifle. And then, this man is like, yeah, it's got to be true. It's got to be true. Because no one else other than his father and son knew where this rifle was kept, right? So now, I want to ask you, now, is there a connection, a physical connection between, this past life and this present life? Is there a connection? This was in Udaipur and this is in Mumbai. Is there any connection? Karma, okay. But physically, there's no way he could have known all these things. But what is the connection is the soul connection. That is why he's able to know all these things. The soul is the same soul. So he knew this. So there's many, many cases. If you type up Ian Stevenson and past life memories on Google, you will find many things, and there's many videos, many pictures, and so on. Here's another, this was the lady next life. She became this little girl. I'm not going to go into the story. Here's another one. This girl, Meenu, she claims that she was Sudha in her previous life and she was murdered by her husband. And a birthmark on Meenu's forehead is the same spot where she was fatally hit. And this is often things that we find. Somebody sometimes lost their life in a previous life by accident or something, and their leg got cut off or something. And oftentimes, they may be born in this life without half the leg. Or sometimes people have some very big, like birth scars or something. I've read of stories where somebody was shot and there's a scar in the chest or something, or some other kind of birthmark. So this is very much indicative of something happening within the past life. There's another American boy, Ryan. He was 4 years old, and he began talking of his past, of how he was in the Hollywood, he was an actor of some sort. And I want to share this one. His name is James. It's a short video, 3 minutes, yeah. Why is the sound not playing? Not loud.
His parents say began as a toddler.
And I said, "Oh, look, there's a bomb on the bottom." He said, "That's not a bomb, that's a drop tank."
Then came the violent drawings and night terrors.
Bombing ships, you see men parachuting. Here's another one where planes are dropping bombs.
Help me. He would just be crying. He'd say, "Airplane crash on fire, little man can't get out." He laid on his back and kicked up at the ceiling, and he goes, "Mama, the little man's going like this." And he laid on his back and kicked his feet up. The little man's going, "Ooh, ooh, 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 can't get out." And I said, "Well, who's the little man, baby?" And he goes, "Me." I thought Bruce and I were just going to faint.
They questioned, what kind of plane?
Corsair.
"Why did your airplane crash?
My plane was shot down.
Who shot your plane?"
He looked at me like I was a village idiot. He said,
"The Japanese."
He said his name was James,
But his name is James.
whose plane took off from the USS Natoma Bay and was shot down over Chichijima. The Leiningers hoped to disprove it, but learned it was all real, including a pilot named James Houston. Leo Pyatt served with Houston.
Yes, there was a Jim Houston, a rather large shell. Just hit him in the engine, and it burst into flames and went down.
James recognized other shipmates by name and told his mother about James Houston's most treasured possessions and his sisters, Annie and Ruth.
It freaked me out.
This looks like an amusement park ride, but to James, it's a World War II flight simulator. He has more than 50 specific memories. Reincarnation experts call it the most documented case ever.
It's a great case because it is verifiable.
Carol Bowman spent over 2 decades researching reincarnation. Her books and guidance helped the Leiningers on their journey.
She was so helpful, and then the nightmares immediately started reducing.
Carol's advice came from personal experience when her own 5-year-old son revealed he was a Civil War soldier.
And he described how he went behind a cannon, and the next thing he knew, he was floating above the battlefield.
Carol says reincarnation is a natural phenomenon. She's currently working with a California boy whose memories of September 11th started right after seeing this picture.
And he saw the Twin Towers, and the memory was triggered that he said he was a firefighter, and he was very upset because he couldn't get the people out of the building.
She encourages parents to listen and comfort the child.
They need to know that they are now safe, that whatever happened is over, and they are in a new life.
Which is exactly what Bruce and Andrea did for James, even traveling to Chichijima for a memorial service at the site of James Houston's plane crash.
And James just got so emotional and just lost it.
But when it was over,
it was cathartic.
we're able to close the loop, especially for James.
They published this book, Soul Survivor, to share their story. James is now 13, and the memories of James Houston's life are fading fast. But he says, the bond they share is eternal.
I hope that it helps people understand the meaning of how precious life is, how fast it can just blow away.
So now you may ask, why can't we remember our past lives? How many of you would like to remember the past life? Anybody would like to remember their past lives? You'd like to remember your past lives. No one else. Yeah? Okay. You couldn't connect with it. Like a hypnosis kind of workshop? Yeah. So there's ways to know your past lives. Even through astrology, one can know their past life. So why is it that we can't remember our past lives? It's actually a good thing that we don't remember our past lives, you know? Just imagine if this room was dark right now and, you know, we had a way to maybe like project all your life until now, you know? And I'm sure there has been some bad things that have happened in your life. Do you think you might, you know, latch on to those things that happened and, you know, become agitated or disturbed by it? We would. We would. So what do we remember usually? What do we remember? We, let's say, walk outside, you know, and there's many people that we see. Of course, in America, we see very few people unless you go to the mall or something. You don't see people on the road very much, unlike some India or some other developing countries. But we see many people when we go shopping or something. How many people do we remember? Very few. But we do remember, you know, whom do we remember all the time? We remember our closest relationships. We remember our parents. We remember our children. We remember our uncles, aunts, whoever, right? Why do we remember them? We remember them because we have a certain attachment to them, and therefore we remember them. But when there is absence of that attachment, then you don't remember. Sometimes I meet new people, and with some people there's like a connection, and you know, the name registers, everything registers. And some other times, even I'm trying to remember, I'm not very good sometimes at remembering the name, although I know the face maybe. You know, but I may not think of them every day or something because there's no attachment there. So it's said actually that it's usually a person who's very, very attached to some scene that they remember this. They're very, you know, they're very latched on to some relationship or something. Sometimes, you know, somebody is so attached to the family. There was another case where the person was a grandfather, you know, and he comes back, you know, now as, you know, he was a grandfather in the family, now he's a baby. So when somebody is very, very attached to that family, they may come back in the same family too because of that attachment. But the remembrance of past lives, it's not necessarily that it's a good thing. It's actually in our scriptures, it is stated that those who are sinful remember their past lives. Because too much attachment is not a very good thing. Too much material or bodily attachment is not necessarily a good thing. So it's good that we don't remember. If we were to remember all our past lives and all the things that we did, we would be very traumatized, frankly speaking. We would be very traumatized. Even to know one thing, it's not, you know, sometimes very pleasant. Sometimes, you know, we do some mistake. Maybe we did that mistake 10 years ago, and somebody reminds us of that. We don't, you know, we don't like it very much because it's painful. Okay, I did a mistake. Can you just like leave it alone? So what to speak of some very big mistakes that we made, you know, in our previous lives. It's not pleasant. We can get re-traumatized by those experiences. So it's a good thing that we don't remember. Now, the next question is, if the soul is there, you may really ask, why can't we see the soul? Of course, we saw one of the ways in which we can see the soul, but why can't we see the soul? So, suppose I give you, I wish I had a real rose in my hand, but I just have pictures here. I was thinking to bring real things, but anyway, here we go. Suppose I give you this rose in your hand, and I ask you, is there rose perfume in this? Liquid rose perfume in this? What would you say? Huh? How many of you say yes? Okay. And how many of you say no? Obviously, the other people are saying no then. Okay. All right. Hold on to that thought. Here's some sesame seeds. Is there oil in this? There is. Okay. All right. there's a piece of wood here. Is there fire in the wood? Is there fire in the wood? No. Okay, there's no fire in the wood. Who says there's fire in the wood? Okay, there are two people here who are saying there's fire in the wood. All right. Here's some milk. Is there ghee in this milk? Yes, everyone is saying yes, because some of you, especially the ladies, they have made ghee from milk. Here's some sugar cane. Is there jaggery in this? Yes. Okay. But can we see all these things? No, you can't. But how can you see these things that I talked about? When can you see them? They're there. Even in the wood, there is fire. Just it takes a little spark for the wood to catch fire. So there is fire stored in the wood, and by the contact of a little spark, then the fire comes out. The fire that is stored within the wood. So all these things are there. There's jaggery, so it goes through the sugarcane juice and the molasses, and then the next step, jaggery comes. Right? Similarly, the rose perfume comes, sesame oil comes. So what is it that makes us see? I'm looking for a simple word. Experience. Process. Very good. That's the exact word I was looking for. Very good. So there's a process by which you can see, right? So as fragrance in flower, oil in sesame seeds, fire in wood, ghee in milk, sugar in sugar cane is there. So to see the supreme divine in the body or the soul, there is a process. There's a process for this. And what is that process? We'll find out that process. Now, let me ask another question. If you want to measure length or breadth of something, what would you use? A tape or something. If they're very small things, we used to use vernier calipers in school, right? To very accurately measure something. Now, if you want to test the alkalinity or acidity of something, what do you use? You use a litmus paper, right? And if you want to, maybe look at the cell structure of something, what do you use? You use a microscope. Now, if I say I want to measure the length with a microscope, you would call me crazy. Or if I want to say that I want to, measure the alkalinity with the vernier calipers or something, is it possible? So what am I trying to say here? What's the conclusion of this simple, what am I trying to say? You have to choose the right process or the right tools. So different subjects have different tools which cannot be interchangeably used. Now, what is the quality of the soul? What is it made of? It's spiritual. It's spirit in nature. And what are all these instruments? Even if it is a nano or whatever, I don't know what is, material. So these instruments, no matter how, even if it's an electron microscope or what is further beyond that, I don't know all the names. But anyway, they can see smaller things than electrons nowadays. So, I forget the name. Anyway, anybody knows? Okay, good. Good that we have some intelligent people in the room. So you can see very, very small particles. But can we, so these instruments are made of what? They're made of material elements. They're made of matter. So can you use matter to see spirit? You cannot do that. Just as much as you cannot measure length with a litmus paper, you cannot see spirit with material eyes or material instruments in any way. So people always say, I will believe if you show me this. But actually it's not possible. So now, let us quickly go through some characteristics of the soul that are described in the Bhagavad Gita. So here we have, this is a verse that is just describing the amazing nature of the soul. Some look on the soul as amazing, some describe him as amazing, and some hear of him as amazing, while others, even after hearing about him, cannot understand him at all. And this is the amazing nature of the soul, first of all. The soul is described as, the size of soul is described as 1/10,000th the tip of hair. And this is the same size which is animating a little bacteria or a big elephant or a human being, right? And that's most amazing. So here's body, which is matter. The nature of matter is that it is always temporary, as we saw. It's asat, it's not conscious, and it's devoid of any bliss, right? And the spirit is sat, or eternal. It's chit, or conscious, and ananda, or blissful. So the nature of soul is that it's sat, chit, ananda. How many of you heard this word before? Sat, chit, ananda. So because we are eternal, nobody likes to die. Would anybody like to die? No. It is our greatest fear. Death is our greatest fear. So nobody likes to die. And chit means not only consciousness, but it also means knowledge. That the soul is fully knowledgeable, and therefore we're always wanting to know everything, right? The moment the child is 2 or 2.5, what does this child ask always? What is this, mommy? What's that? What's that? How? Why? You know, always wants to know something, because this is the nature of the soul. Sometimes, you know, mommy really get fed up. Stop asking, what is it? What is it? Right? So this is the nature that it likes to, and we always want to acquire knowledge because the soul is fully knowledgeable. And it's also the nature of the soul to be blissful, and therefore we're always seeking happiness. This is a natural state. When we are fully awakened to our true self, this is what we'll experience. So quickly go through a few verses. The soul is indestructible. The soul can never be cut to pieces by any weapon, nor burned by fire, nor withered by wind, nor moistened by water. That means it's always unchangeable. Nothing can touch it. And if we are the soul, can anybody touch us or do anything really? If somebody insults us, who are they insulting? Nothing can touch the soul. It's only our false identification, you know, with our subtle body. I'm going to show you that slide later. What is the subtle body? The soul is an individual. So never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. This is a verse that Krishna speaks to Arjuna. So each of us are individuals. That means that we are not all the same soul distributed amongst everyone. It's not like one soul is distributed in everyone, right? We are all individual souls, and we are individuals at all times. In the past, present, future, we are individuals. And the proof of that is also even a simple example, like you know that I'm thinking or you're thinking, you know, but can you accurately guess what I'm thinking? No, you can't. It's because why? You're different, your thinking process is different. My thinking, if we are the same soul, I should be able to understand what's going on in your mind too. But there is the super soul who can actually understand everything in everyone's hearts, because the super soul, or the Paramatma, he is the same in everyone's heart. It's the same person who's divided in all the living entities. So he can understand, but we can't. Even identical twins also cannot predict the thinking of the other person. And the spirit soul does not undergo any kind of transformations. No birth, no death. We read this verse before, so I won't go through it again. And this is describing the size of the soul. So everything is already in the scripture. As we are seeing, the size of soul is 1/10,000, the size of the tip of hair. And the soul is located in the region of the heart, but it's not exactly in the physical heart. So it's not like when you do a heart transplant, our soul gets transplanted into someone else. It doesn't. Our soul stays with us. So it's in the region. But again, it's spiritual in nature. You can't just transplant it like that, the heart. And while being seated here, the consciousness is spreading throughout the body, right? Like I said before, even some little thing, little eyelash somewhere is there on our body. We can feel it. But it is just this tiny thing situated in the region of the heart. And obviously, by now we can understand that the soul is inconceivable. It's invisible, it's inconceivable, it's immutable. It also means that it cannot be cleaved in any way. You cannot divide it in any way. All right? So, here is a picture of the different layers. So the soul is the central generating force by which everything happens. And then there is the subtle body, right? Which is, you can compare it like to an inner coat, right? And this has the 3 elements and the 5 airs. So mind, intelligence, false ego, this is our subtle body. And the gross body is what we are seeing. So if you remember, we were talking about identities. So most of the identities we talked about are the gross identities. But then there's also subtle identities which are on the platform of the mind. But we are not that. Just like we think, I am respectable, or I am great in some way, or I'm, worthless in some way. So these are identifications on the platform of the mind or the subtle body. So here is the soul, and the subtle body, and the gross body. Gross body is made of earth, water, fire, air, ether. We saw that. Did we see that last time? No, maybe that was a Sunday class. It was a Sunday class last week. Yeah, we were speaking about that. But we are not the subtle body. We're not the gross body. But we are actually the soul. And there's many characteristics of soul. We're not going to go through this whole table, but this is all described just within the 2nd chapter of Bhagavad Gita. All right. And just a little bit scientific stuff again. Even according to quantum physics now, they acknowledge that there is something called and something that is called antimatter, right? They don't call it spirit, but they understand that it has the opposite properties, right? So proton and so one is matter, one is antimatter. This is visible, that is invisible. This is measurable, that is immeasurable. This is destroyable, and that is undestroyable. So even scientists have come to these conclusions, but yet they don't exactly call it spirit because they're not allowed to speak about God, really, right? So now, just a couple more slides. Am I God? Are we God? Can we ever be God? We're not God, but we are gods, with an apostrophe there. So it is not, because some people say when you become self-realized, you become God. But no, we're not God. We will never become God. Actually, we are part and parcel of God, but we can never become God. So again, in Bhagavad Gita, in the 15th chapter, Krishna says there are 2 classes of beings, fallible and infallible. And in the material world, everyone is fallible. In the spiritual world, every entity is infallible. And so this is the difference between the soul and the super soul. So living entities are called jivatmas, God is Paramatma. We are infinitesimally small, whereas God is infinite. And we are only cognizant of our body, but super soul or God is cognizant of everyone and everything. We are loving servitors, or at least we are meant to be loving servitors of God, and God is the loving master eternally. There's many souls, and there's one super soul or God. Okay? And again, the soul is Krishna's part and parcel. This is also a verse from Bhagavad Gita. Krishna directly says that the living entities are my parts and parcels, that they're my eternal fragmental parts, he says. But because of conditioned life, they forget this and they're struggling very hard in this world. So, having understood that we are the soul, we must take care of our soul. Prabhupada would like to tell this little story always, that here's a lady who has a parrot in the cage. And this lady would every day, polish the cage and dust the cage and take care of the cage very nicely, but she would never feed the parrot. And you can see that the parrot is laying there dead. And similarly, if we don't take care of the soul's needs, we also feel quite unhappy, unsatisfied, undernourished, right? We don't feel life. Can all of us sometimes, I'm sure all of you have experienced it, sometimes do we feel this life is such a drag and what is in it, and we just don't feel this enthusiasm to keep going on, but we just keep going on because, okay, we have to feed the family and we have to take care of the kids, or we have to do this, we have to do that. There's duties. But there is no life enthusiasm, because real life comes from the soul. And as long as we are not taking care of the needs of the soul, we're going to feel like that. We're not going to feel truly happy, no matter. So all the things that we're doing here in this world, it's only on the platform of the gross body or the subtle body, right? All the needs that we usually take care of. And how much are we doing for the soul, right? This is something to consider, and we're going to talk about it. But here is one verse which speaks how do we nourish our soul actually? What is the way? So here it's explained through an analogy that there are two birds on the same tree. One bird is eating and enjoying the fruits, and the other bird is witnessing. Okay? So the witnessing bird is always thinking, when will this bird turn to me? And that is actually Krishna, or Super Soul, who's always waiting for us to turn to him and engage in his service in some way. That is actually the way to cultivate or nourish our relationship with God, or that is actually the way to nourish our soul also. So just read this quickly. Although the two birds are in the same tree, the eating bird is fully engrossed with anxiety and moroseness as the enjoyer of the fruits of the tree. But if in some way or other he turns his face to his friend, who's the Lord, and knows his glories, at once the suffering bird becomes free from all anxieties. Arjuna has now turned his face towards his eternal, got cut off. Anyway, towards his eternal master, basically. So, as long as we don't act in our relationship with God, we're not going to be able to nourish our soul. And we are always denying our true self. And we're going to get withered up and dead sooner or later, like, the bird in the cage. So, to know our real identity as a spirit soul separate from matter, we have to get transcendental knowledge. So hearing is the first step in awakening this, and it's wonderful that all of you are coming every week and hearing this subject matter, and by this you're nourishing your soul. And with this little cartoon, there's two fish here. They're talking to each other. One is saying, I just figured out the true meaning of life, water. So no matter what you give the fish, if it doesn't have water, there's no meaning to a fish's life. You can give it a nice lounge chair, an umbrella, some juice, you can bring other fishes out. Here's your friends. But the fish, as long as it's not in the water, it cannot exist. That's its true life. And in the same way, our soul's true life is actually in relationship with God. as long as we are not acting in relation with that, we also feel like a fish out of water. We're doing so many things, but it's not really nourishing us in any way. Or it seems like something is giving us something, but it's so temporary. And then we have to look for something else after some time. All right, so just a 1-minute summary of what we discussed today. We discussed our real identity. It's not the material body, but spirit, soul. We went through the proof of existence of soul using common sense. That is the difference between a living and a dead body. We always say somebody passed away or left the body. Who left the body? It's the soul. The intuitive understanding. We say my hand, my leg. So we are separate from our hand or leg. So who am I? That's the soul. Consciousness is a symptom of the presence of soul, and that is manifested as thinking, feeling, willing. And we have the near-death experiences, past life memories. And then we discuss the characteristics of the soul, a few of them mentioned here. And modern civilization is all about polishing the cage of the body and starving the bird of the soul. And our humble attempt should be to nourish the soul. So any questions? Yes. Yeah. Can you give another mic there? Is it possible? This is, at least for the recording's sake. How about we just give this?
So when you go in deep sleep, which is not in a swapna, is that like a sushupti?
No, it's not. Still sleep. Hare Krishna. No, it's not on. So no, it's not. Okay, just turn it off. I'm just gonna take this back. No. No, I was just giving the example of REM and NREM just for you all to relate. But it's not that when you go to deep sleep, it's like susupti. No, it's not really. It's not like coma. Because in coma, the consciousness is, at a different level where you can't awaken the person. Whereas when you're sleeping, you can be awakened by different methods. It's not swapna, but it's, broadly called like that as swapna. Yeah. 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 Any other questions or comments? Yes.
You mentioned that near-death experiences and past life memories are not very good to remember the past life because we might have something bad that we don't want to remember now, but the soul seems something that you want to know. The soul, your soul, because your soul went through so many lives. And I since childhood wasn't afraid. I wanted to know everything what I could possibly can. And as soon as I was in my adult age, I was looking for answers. Who I was and why I feel the way that I feel, because it didn't explain, my life didn't explain it. So I wanted to know all the answers from the past lives or wherever I can find.
So what I was trying to say is that it's not necessarily a good thing, because it can be quite traumatic. And that is why normally everybody doesn't remember their past life. It's rare, rare souls remember, and that's usually an indication of this extreme attachment. Now, your questions are valid, that you want to know. There are things that you're experiencing, going through, which don't seem to make sense, and you want answers to that. But our scriptures, they explain that we can understand these things by another method. We don't necessarily have to go back to past lives and know what we did in our past life. We can understand that simply by knowing that we have a certain tendency. By that, we can already understand that something must have happened in the past life. And we don't need to know that information. But what is important to know is that, okay, we have some tendency, it doesn't connect to this life, but something must have happened somewhere. Like some people, just to make it specific, some people feel rejected very, very easily. You know, it's just little thing. You know, if you're half day late in returning a phone call, they can feel rejected sometimes, and they always doubt the relationship or something. So what does that say? Why is that some people are feeling such strong rejection out of just ordinary things? It indicates that they definitely experienced something in early on in the life. Maybe sometimes some of these people, even at the time of birth, they were not wanted children, they were not taken care of, or maybe early on in the childhood they were abandoned in some way. Maybe the mother didn't take care of the child, or sometimes it's carried on from a past life. Similarly, phobias. Why are some people so scared of water? Some people are so scared of closed spaces. That tells us that something happened, some terrible thing. Maybe they died out of drowning. Maybe somebody did something horrible in a closed space, so now they can't even go for an MRI. You know, they're so scared. But, so we don't need to know the details. We can understand that this is an impression within the subtle body or the mind. It's called samskara in Sanskrit. So it's an impression in the mind. But we just learned here that we are not the mind. So scripture teaches us that we are not the mind, we are not the intelligence, we are not the false ego or the false identity, and we are also not the body, right? So do we need to identify with that? We don't need to identify that. So what should we identify with? We should identify with being the soul and do the duties of a soul or the functions of a soul. And the more we do what the soul is meant to do, which is basically devotional service, as the soul engages in devotional service, all these past impressions, everything just get dissolved. It takes time, but everything, it depends on the intensity of our practice, but everything gets dissolved. And simply going and trying to find out what happened, it doesn't serve any ultimate spiritual purpose. Of course, sometimes some people have had such bad trauma or abuse even in this life that emotionally they're very, very stuck. So in those cases, it may go help to sort out things, because when we have knowledge about something that happens is that we develop a little bit of objective vision. There is some detachment that comes from it. So sometimes if it's done, nicely, then it may be helpful. But also, it can throw us in the space of feeling like I'm a victim, all these bad things happen. But we're not the victims either, We're spirit souls, that's our true identity. Victim is not our true identity. And by taking on this true identity and keeping on going in our devotional service, all these other false identities will be dissolved. And the true nature of the soul, the blissful nature of the soul will awaken and awaken. We don't want just removal of the problems. We want positive state of happiness, positive nourishment of the soul. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay. Anything else? Yes. I'm sorry for this. Next week we should fix this.
So, you said that soul is eternal and it would it was never born and it wouldn't die. So when the world was created, probably, that's when all the souls would have been created by the super soul. But then, like how we say in Hinduism, that we keep taking births, like in every birth we are somebody else or something else. So we might be a bug, or we might be a pig, and another birth we are a human. So, all of this, sometime it would stop when you are done taking all the birth. Then what happens to the soul? Like, does it kind of becomes a super soul, or it's like, is it like, does it ever get over? Or like, how they say in Hinduism that when you die, that they offer you, or whatever, the last rites, whatever you do, it's for the purpose that, it's, yeah. So like,
good question. So the souls, as you heard from Bhagavad Gita, the souls never come into being at one point. They're always there, just as much as God is always there. He's eternal. The meaning of eternal is that there's no point at which it came into existence. And that's really hard for us to conceive, because we're so in the material world, we only know of things that come into existence at a certain point and leave at a certain point, right? Well, we haven't experienced, we don't have an experience of something eternal. So just as God is eternal, souls are also eternal. They did not come into being at some point. Because even the creation that you're talking about, it happens in cycles, meaning that the creation is not the creation of souls. The souls are always there. In fact, we are all in the spiritual world. This material creation is only meant for those souls who don't want to serve the Lord, but who want to try to enjoy separately from the Lord. And Krishna says, don't go, Baba, you're not going to have fun in the material world, because you really belong here. It's going to be difficult, and we are like rebellious teenagers, saying, no, I want to enjoy, So Krishna says, all right, I will create this material world where you can try to feel like you're the enjoyer, you're the master of something, and you own something, and so on. But also, he gave us scriptures and the process of devotional service to come back. And also there's suffering in this material world. One of the main reasons suffering is also there is that at least when we are suffering, we ask, why is this going on? Who am I? So then we go back. But your question was also that, is there a point when we stop taking bodies? Yes. We don't take any more material bodies when we become fully self-realized and God-realized. And self-realization is incomplete without God-realization. So full self-realization means not only we understand who we are, the soul, but our relationship with the whole, whom we are part of, right? So that is the full realization or full awakening of self. And when that is awakened, then we take on a spiritual body. There's no more material bodies, and for the spiritual body, there is no death. We're eternally in the spiritual world then. And once we go back, we'll never come to this material world back again. It's kind of like once burned, twice shy, So it's like that. And Krishna, and not only that, but Krishna promises that once you return to my kingdom, you will never return again. It says that to Arjuna.
So what I wanted to know was, at the start of the session, you did somewhere mention about purpose of life. So is that something different that will be covered in certain next sessions, or if it is with respect to today's session, then I have some further questions around that.
The purpose of life, yeah. So we touched on it a little bit. We didn't go into any details here, but the purpose of life is basically to awaken our true self. That is the basic purpose of human life. And human life is very, very, very rare. Amongst all the species of life, this is the only form where we have this particular kind of intelligence, as we saw, right? Where we can inquire into the absolute truth. So the purpose of life is that we conduct our life in such a way that this purpose is fulfilled. In simple words, that this purpose of awakening our true self is fulfilled, or our relationship with God can be awakened. That is how we must conduct. And how to do that, that's another session. We'll talk about it a little bit in practical spirituality, but yes, we're not going to be able to cover everything, obviously, because, yeah. And then we can continue after that in a different forum than this. For those of you who want to continue with weekly classes, we can do weekly classes, and we can go through Bhagavad Gita systematically.
Where I was actually getting to was like basically purpose in life. With a lot of people, right? I mean, like you see, they seem to have found out what their purpose in life is. I mean, like maybe they are in tune with their purpose and what their actions are and what they're doing, and they're pretty happy with whatever it is. Right?
You mean to see like, they found maybe some passion or some profession or social work or... Okay, so people talk about that, saying that I found my meaning and purpose in life. Now, when we say that, on what platform is it again? Ask that simple question, So, what is it serving? That purpose, what is it serving? Okay, somebody wants to, just be a doctor. Actually, this was one of the questions that I asked myself as a teenager. I knew I wanted to be a doctor, but then I had this question. All right, even as a teenager, before I went to medical school, I had this question. All right, I'll be a doctor. I'll do good work. Maybe I'll do some social work too. But then what? I'm going to die after that. So already there was some awareness that all this work that we're doing, what is it touching? It's only touching the body. What is it doing for the soul? What is it doing for the soul? And as long as it's not touching the soul, scriptures are very heavy about it. They say it's all just a loss. All these mountains we have built in this material world, we cannot take back with us. Our true self is lost. So people are working so hard. I'm not saying they're not doing some good work. Okay, they're doing some good work. They're helping some people. But that help alone is not enough. So there's charities and stuff like that. There's social work. It's good. It's good you're educating people. It's good you're opening free hospitals. It's good, whatever, some charitable stuff. That's wonderful. But we are not, so this question will also be addressed in why bad things happen to good people. Further, it'll be addressed, but we're not considering in that what brought them to that situation in the first place. Right? If you can so if you had an option, okay, I can remove your suffering for 10 minutes or I can remove your suffering eternally, what would you choose for? Forever, obviously. So it's valuable that you can give me some pain relief or whatever it is for some time, but we are not addressing the root cause. Remember, we talked about addressing the root cause of the problem. The root cause will not be solved by this. We're not addressing that. So they may feel that because they're very stimulated and they feel like this is driving them, that's great. But if they can use that, whatever their passion is, also in service to the Lord, that would be the fulfillment of that. Whatever gift God has given, if you can use that in the service of the Lord, that is when there will be complete fulfillment for that person. And otherwise, it's a loss. Maybe we'll get good karma. And again, we'll discuss this more in the 5th session. It'll make more sense. You had a question?
Thank you. So, just a general question, like is soul just applicable to the human bodies or all kind of bodies? Like animal also have life, right? Yes. So they also might have soul. So
not might, they do.
So
What is applicable?
The soul, like the
No,
definition of soul.
No, it's everyone. It's all the living entities. So yes, the soul is there in all the living entities. If you remember the example I said, even the plants. What is the symptom of the presence of soul in the plants? The plants turn to sunshine, or the plants grow. The same effects. They come into being, birth, growth, stay for some time, produce fruits, dwindle, die. Right? They're going through the same stages. Sure, it can be. Yes, we have been through millions of lifetimes. We could have been in heavenly planets as devatas. We could have been in the animal planets. We could have been a plant. We could have been a reptile. Yeah, very much.
It really depends on what are the karma or karma we have to make in
Huh?
Who defines that? Will be animal or...
Oh, who defines that? We'll discuss that in the 5th session further. Yeah, we'll discuss. And in one sense, we discussed last week a little bit, if you remember. That we're born this way, we're born that way. You were not here last time? Oh, you were not. Okay. All right. Okay, last 2 questions. And then the rest of the questions we'll discuss over Prasad.
You discussed about the Jivatma and Paramatma. Is the super soul God?
Is the super soul God?
Yeah.
Yes.
So what happens if does the super soul might transmigrate with the soul?
Yes. Super soul is the localized form of God. And this is something also we'll see in the next session when we're discussing one God or many gods. We'll talk about this. So maybe we can talk about it further at that time. But yes, the super soul, the Paramatma, he doesn't die. He's God. He's an expansion of God or a manifestation of God. And he is always, it's one person or one entity, you can say. And he's always with us. He goes with us in any body. And he's always prompting, like those 2 birds. He's always prompting, turn to me, turn to me. That little voice inside.